thing that I love. It's needlessly overanalyzing animated kids films for no reason other than my own satisfaction. I don't know what it is, but it's just fun to pick holes in stories sometimes, especially when it seems like it's something that the filmmakers expect you to just take at face value and never really question at all. Things like, how was the old lady from Tangled even able to kidnap Rapunzel at all, when besides the song with the flower, she never actually does any magic at all on screen? How's this old lady climbing castle walls with no gear and no magic? Please. Or, how does the Kingdom of Arendelle even function at all? How's it not crumbled into dust? It's those kinds of questions that really do keep me up at night. Those kinds of questions that lead to me ranting on the internet. And so today, I'm back with a fresh one. So recently I was thinking about Zootopia, as you do, and the story that I knew and loved. I kind of started questioning it and seeing that perhaps it's a bit sloppier than I originally thought. Okay, so quick recap to the plot. Zootopia is pretty much the story of Judy Hopps, a rabbit of lowly origins, who rises to become the first ever bunny member of the Zootopia City Police Department, where she finds herself relegated to busy work as a token member of the force, namely becoming a meter maid, or a parking inspector, for those that don't know what that is. Demoralized, she loses passion and hope until she meets con artist Nick Wilde, and through a series of events, she finds herself embroiled in working to uncover the secret as to why a number of predator species have recently been going savage, whipping up fear amongst the prey species of the city and causing division and disharmony. And this eventually leads her to supposedly busting the mayor of Zootopia, a predator, a lion, and throwing all predator species under the bus accidentally with racially charged statements, which damages her friendship with Nick, who is a fox. This then leads to a rise in anti-predator discrimination, which in turn leads to her quitting the force to move back to her rural community out of shame for what she said and did. She then has a moment of inspiration, comes back, she reunites with Nick, and she fixes things there, before managing to uncover the true conspiracy. That it was in fact Deputy Mayor Bellwether, a little sheep, a prey species, that had actually been orchestrating this series of events, down to manufacturing drugs that would drive predators insane and make them savages. She managed to get all that on recording, she gets the deputy mayor arrested, and everybody realized that being racist is bad. At least, I think they realized. I hope they realized this. She then becomes a valued member of the force, and Nick becomes a police officer alongside her. And so it's happy endings all around. And when this first released, I did not question any of this. It seemed like a pretty stock standard racism storyline. Don't judge a book by its cover, that sort of stuff. Discrimination's bad. Hell, in the years since, I actually sometimes thought to myself, oh, that was a really well done storyline. Quite deep. Oh, foolish young smarty pants that I was. I didn't look any deeper than that. Until recently, that is, because I started thinking, was it handled well? Or did I get tricked into thinking so because of the cutesy animals and the music and just the wholesome vibes this film puts out? And I think it might be the latter, because in hindsight, as a racism analogy, or really any sort of xenophobic analogy, to me the film gets very muddled, and it lacks a lot of sense. And in a few ways, it kind of makes me think this film was low-key trying to suggest that everybody is an equal victim of prejudice and inequality, which certainly a bold stance to take. And if not, well, I think the film simply loses its way in that regard. Okay, so we start with Judy, who joins the police force only to find herself marginalized and put on the bench, so to speak, because she's just a cutesy little bunny. She leaves the police force, leave the police work for the big animals, the real police officers, and all that jazz. And so I guess you could probably draw links to sexism here. The reality is that the cutesy little animals, like a bunny, are not going to be treated with the same respect as the bigger, more imposing animals like a gorilla, a water buffalo, a rhinoceros, that kind of thing. And this one does work, especially since we see later the main villain is Deputy Mayor Bellwether, who is also an ignored and cutesy little sheep, and also a woman, just like Judy. Hammers down on that analogy quite nicely. So that's where we start. And since it's such a big part of the start, and the end of the film, in a way I think it did overshadow the hokey attempt at a racism storyline and make things seem a lot better. Okay, so the whole middle section of the film revolves around the concept of predator species going savage, being violent and aggressive, and reverting to their base instincts, with the helpless prey species unable to do anything to protect themselves from these mindless beasts. You see predators therefore get isolated, animals crossing the street to avoid them, moving away from them on public transport, pretty much stock standard real life tactics that people with racial prejudice use. Like, for example, you see a Middle Eastern looking person, and said racist person might cross the street as they're scared this person might be a terrorist, or they move away from them on the train, or shield their children from them, or simply are very willing to believe the worst of them because of the actions of a small group of people that belong to that ethnic group. Patronizing language, like Judy uses at the press conference. The implication that predators are backwards compared to prey, they can't help themselves, they're only one step above being completely wild, and at any moment, they could slip back into their more base instincts. You know, as opposed to prey species who don't even need to worry about having to answer these sort of questions, simply based on who they are. And all of this, I think it sort of works fine. At first, it's good world building, you'd think. And they double down on this with Nick's whole backstory of wanting to be part of the Boy Scouts in a troop that was solely made up of prey animals, and they bully him and they force him to wear a muzzle that humiliates him, even after all the work that he and his mum had put into trying to make him fit in, to be part of things. And I'll be honest, that scene, it gets me in my feelings every single time that I remember it. And on top of that, the predators, they're a minority group, so it feels like they are being victimized and oppressed by those damn pesky herbivores, right? Then the film moves on, and the whole villain twist comes into play, and you learn that, well, suddenly what you thought you knew makes a bit less sense. Because the deputy's whole gripe is seemingly that predators are given more opportunity than prey. She uses the mayor as one of her examples. A lion in charge of Zootopia. A lion who's massively corrupt and willing to do anything to make sure he stays in power, including making the savage predators disappear to a random secret facility staffed by his own private police force. Not actual police officers, but just goons. On top of that, it's acknowledged in universe that predator species used to straight up kill and eat the prey. So it was prey that historically have been the victims, historically have been the oppressed, and historically have been those who experienced violence at the hands of the predator species, and who've only really been saved from that fate in the modern day through the development of law and order, society. And from there it's much less black and white suddenly, because what should have been a pretty open and shut morality tale keeps spiraling and spiraling further out of control. So now, it was the prey who have been oppressed and attacked and killed. It was the prey who lived under the thumb of the predators. And yet, it's the predators who are the minority. Right. But yet they still seem to remain in political power. Maybe not social power, as we see with Nick, but politically. And there is still some racism against prey from the predators. Like, for example, the neighbor kid from Judy's hometown. So suddenly it's like, I kind of get why Mayor Bellwether, Deputy Mayor Bellwether, is mad. I don't condone her trying to kill people, but shit, she's a member of an oppressed class too, isn't she? Herbivores? Prey? Or at least this is a class that historically has been oppressed by this violent minority. A minority that seems to retain the majority of the political power, with herbivores relied on for busy work, or tokenism, the grunts. I'd be kind of pissed too. Feels like South African colonialism. Apartheid, where the historically oppressive minority are the ones who get to run the show. But we get skewed into looking at this a certain way because Nick is a genuinely nice guy. He's a criminal and a huckster, but he's nice. And the mafia guy, a murderer, a gangster, and legit is ready to kill Nick and Judy over a pretty minor slight. But since he's funny, it's all good. And so the movie gets you to look past it all. But I just couldn't stop noticing more flies in the ointment, so to speak. The most notable to me being that, racism in real life is based on pure xenophobia, but here, there really is basis in truth. Like, I've personally not heard of a black dude going insane and trying to eat people on the train, but this shit legit happens to characters in this film. So suddenly, is this not more of a murky issue? And like I said, this is behaviour from a group that historically have been violent and aggressive and will eat you, and a group that has the power. And so it builds this weird sort of both sides narrative where the story wants you to completely side with the predators, uses sad anecdotes, real life imagery, when in reality, I feel like the plight of the prey is just as sad. They've been pushed to the side for ages in favour of a historically violent and oppressive minority group. And so yeah, whilst they shouldn't have become extremists, you also get their side way more than I think the movie wants you to, and way more than I actually think you should. Like, what the hell? Why is this movie making me sort of empathise with terrorists? What's going on here? And so because of this, I kind of think the story's damaged. It comes across as lacking foresight, a bit sloppy. This is not what you want. You don't want the prey species, or at least the crazy prey species, the ones that are trying to make the predators go nuts. You don't want them to be sympathetic at all, but they kind of are, and you kind of understand what's going on. And I think they do understand this at points because they really do double down to try to show that prey dominates in pretty much every other sphere. The majority of the police characters, for instance, and the public servants, they're prey. And so suddenly you're back to that other side again. And it just all becomes confusing and annoying. And as I've grown older, whilst this film does still have a bit of a magical element to me and is exciting and fun, I also think it's no longer the greatest example of this type of story. It's very sloppy. And so yeah, really not much else to say. And so I think we'll call it here. And so with all that being said, I'll pass it to you. What do you think of what I've said? Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm just being insane?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's just gibberish. Gibberish of an insane person.
I'm really curious for what you have to say, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.